All right, we're good to go.
Okay. Hello, world. Good afternoon. This is Megan and the team from the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights. And if you are tuning in live, thank you so much for joining us. We are very pleased today to be releasing an online educational resource, which is so important, especially at this time, and launching the Reconciliation website, which will be hosting a community toolkit and various other resources. So before we begin this short presentation, we'd like to acknowledge that we here are situated in Amiskwaciy, Waskahegan, Edmonton area, and we'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and the trading routes for many Indigenous peoples, including Nehiyaw, Nakota Sioux, Métis, Blackfoot, Dene, and Saulteaux. Their spiritual and practical relationships to the land create a rich heritage for our learning and our life as a community. We're so grateful to the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. And we hold our hands up to their amazing resistance, resilience, and strength in the face of ongoing dispossession and injustice. And on that note, we raise our hands to all of you and send our love out in these trying times as we're all under lockdown due to a global pandemic. To start us off in a good way, I would like to introduce Louise Podshek. She is a grandmother from our Writing Relations Circle. And just briefly, Writing Relations is a pan-Canadian network of women-led radical adult educators, organizers, and accomplices. They're working in solidarity across a variety of social, political, environmental, and human rights issues in this country. The heart-centered approach that Writing Relations stands by is really exemplified by Louise, who lives by her mantra, hearts wide open. So we knew she was the perfect person to start us in a good way and share a few words about the importance of education and the next generation. Over to you, Louise.
Thank you. I'd like to start with the drum song.
Beautiful.
Burning through the night. there? Are you there?
Yes, we are.
Oh.
I am here.
Oh,
It was beautiful.
okay. Thank you. Okay, I just had to put my drum down. Oh. Now, Megan's email here says that she would like to know, or would like me to speak on some of the insights of the importance of letting young people participate in the direction of their own learning and acknowledge those young people as teachers. Oh, well, you all know that one of my heart projects is the education of children, and particularly the very young children, because they're the most open to they're the most open. They know what the truth is, and they are able to still see what the truth is and to feel more intensely. And through my reading and my research, I have found that in the Indigenous communities long ago, grandmothers and grandfathers were the teachers of the children. And because they had been taught by their own grandparents. And what happened apparently during those times was the grandparents would watch closely what the children were involved in, and they would see very definite interest or desire in specific things that each child would be engaged in. And that might have been investigating the bug world or the insect world, or their desire to look at the stars at night, or maybe it was whittling something or creating something of art, or interested in drumming, or interested in some, maybe it was in hunting or tracking, something similar. And that's where those children would be guided. They didn't need to be educated, they just were guided by loving grandparents who could see the strengths of what the child wanted to learn and could see their desire to learn that, to keep their hearts wide open. And they acknowledged that. And there may have been times, I'm sure there probably were times, when the child would switch its interest and would find a stronger desire or to develop a new skill, a new art form. But the children led through their desire, the children led their own education, their own development rather than education. And that's been forgotten. And yes, it's because parents have to both go to work, and there's very little time left between preparing meals and doing laundry and house cleaning and various activities that the children and the parents are involved in. There's very little time, and people go so fast that they don't realize what their children, the skills of their children are that require developing. They maybe want to be an artist or a writer or a singer or something of that nature. When I was going to school and we had to learn all of those subjects, I was not interested in them all. My passion was English literature and language. And I had a story published when I didn't publish the story, my teacher, grade 10 teacher, without me knowing, published the story in the local newspaper. And in that way, she encouraged me. My parents weren't particularly interested. My mom had 10 kids, so it was a little bit difficult. And we no longer, my siblings and I no longer had any grandmothers. We had a grandfather, and yes, he did teach me. He encouraged me to be a gardener because he could see my interest in that. And his first acknowledgement of my desire to be a gardener was Grandpa never went to town except this one time. He went to Wildwood and he bought me a package of bachelor button seeds. And from there, my passion to grow a garden grew. And that's what we need to do with children. They don't need to be sitting in school for 40-minute periods and getting antsy, and then the teachers getting after them. That's no way to direct a child. In my view, that's no way to educate a child. They are smart. They know. They can teach us things. They do teach us things if our hearts and our minds are open to receiving what they're willing to teach. That's my final word, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise, for those wise, wise words. Well, now we're just going to turn it right over to the education lead at the John Humphrey Center, Chelsea Burke, who is going to share this wonderful new resource with you all. And as the presentation goes, if there is anyone tuning in who has some questions, then you can just participate through the chat option, and we will try to get to a couple questions before we close at the end of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Megan. So as Megan mentioned, I'm Chelsea. I'm the education lead here at JHC. So I am going to briefly guide you through the launch of our website and our toolkit. And please bear with me, I haven't done this before, so I will do my best. So I'm going to start here. So this is our website. I'll click on Toolkit. Okay, so this is our Advancing Truth and Reconciliation in Schools Toolkit, which we've made some updates to. So I will just pull down here. So the intention of this toolkit, excuse me, is to share our learnings from school programming and in community, and to provide teachers, administration, and students with a framework to introduce in the classroom. It's intended for grades 5 to 12, as well as just for teachers' knowledge, general knowledge, and is meant to be adapted for each grade. And each section is linked to the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action, Truth and Reconciliation Commission Calls to Action, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples articles. Here are a few quotes from teachers that have used the toolkit. So the toolkit is broken into these topics, and we've changed it around a little bit so it's more visual and a little bit easier to navigate. So it's broken into each of these sections, and each section has activities, additional lessons, resources, and links, as I said. So, excuse me. I'll go through these a little bit more. So I'm just going to start with the calls to action process. So the calls to action is an important process that we use as part of our programming in moving from dialogue to action. And like Louise said, allowing students to really direct their own learning and to decide what they feel is important in their community, in their school's community, to move forward. So in the toolkit, in the main page here, we've included calls to action process, which will lead you through, through the process. And then we also have here some examples of the students' calls to action in the form of videos, which are here. We have a really great zine, which is here. I encourage you to look through that, as well as some of the sample calls to action here from each of the schools. So this one is from our grade 5 class. They had calls to action around treaty, Indigenous language, learning more about residential schools. And so, and here's the one from grade 7. And so this was used to really hold the school culture accountable in moving these things forward. And they implemented many of these things, which is really great, and they were really incredible. And later I will show you the link to a webinar that I put together. It's about 30 minutes, and it just has more details about this process and our school programming. Okay. Bear with me. Okay. So I was just going to show an example of one of the lessons, which is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples lesson. So it includes an activity that we put together. I'll just kind of scroll through. So it has this activity. It has a bit of a vocabulary background for teachers. I'm gonna scroll through it. And then it has, as a part of the activity, it has a list of really great resources, including media, you can see here, for our teachers to access. So there's the APTN, Unreserved, there's Muskrat Magazine, some really great ones, and as well as some language resources. I was trying not to scroll, but it's kind of necessary for this one. And then some additional resources. And another really great thing with this section is that it has a link to a really great youth version of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It has a lot of background, it's very visual. It has all of the articles here. It's really great, so a link to that. So that's just one example of one of the sections of our toolkit. Okay, what's next here? Okay. Excuse me. So back to the toolkit. We have each of these, worldview, treaty, Indigenous language rights, the calls to action process. And then as well, we've added about 3 resources of our own activities, one of which is here called Challenging Our Story of Canada. And so this is an activity that we use, it's the timeline activity, which fosters a deeper understanding of the diverse stories and communities that make up Canadian history and helps to understand the waves of migration on Turtle Island and encourage dialogue on how these things manifest today. And so we have the process here, as well as a couple of different milestones, all Indigenous milestones, and then multiple communities. And then another activity that we added was one that we use a lot. It's called Human Rights Heroes, and that's this one here. And so this activity is to highlight important movements and connect students to the people that are doing the important work of reclaiming culture, fighting against injustice, and writing relations across the country. I'll just encourage you to look through this on your own, but we have the process, which we've created here, as well as links to find heroes, and then some examples that we have that we used for our human rights cards, including Autumn Pelletier and Shannon Kustoshin. And who else do we have here? Mary Sinclair. So yeah, feel free if you have any questions, I can answer them at the end. And also, I'll encourage you to get in touch with us if you have any questions at all moving forward. Let me see, where are we next? And then one of the other ones that we had added was a quick video clip on what's colonization with some guiding questions to really start that conversation in your classroom. hard to see the live feed. Okay. Let's see here. Jump into these. So these are some of our, sorry, Renee?
We're getting ready to hide it on you.
Sorry, I can hear somebody talking back. Okay, so these are our video resources. Some really great resources here, including student-made videos from our school programming, some short films made by Indigenous youth, a little video on some of our professional development sessions. And then this is the webinar that I was talking about that has a bit of a more detailed look at the toolkit and some of our programming. I was trying to make this easier, but. Sorry, 1 second here. So the next thing we're going to look at okay. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. Okay. So are some additional resources. So we looked at the video resources. And now we're going to, excuse me, add in some additional community resources, which are really great. I'm just going to, okay, so we have the webinar. And so some of these resources include a link to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, youth version. This is a really great list of picture books from sea to sea to sea. We've got some activities on that challenge stereotypes. We have the We Matters campaign, lots of really great ones, including a link to a really incredible documentary by Tasha Hubbard called We Will Stand Up, which I personally think is required viewing for everyone. And so we've added a link to that, as well as a short animation that she put together. It's a 6-minute short that talks about some of the history around Treaty 6. It's really great just for anyone, for students. It's a really beautiful resource. As well, we have a resource, a really good one about the Indian Act. Okay. If I'm missing anything here. Okay. So one of the best parts of doing this work is learning from youth, knowledge keepers, and elders in the community and building relationships. And so we started with a list of knowledge keepers and organizations in Treaty 6, and then we've recently expanded it to include Treaty 7 and 8. So we see here, connecting to knowledge keepers. And we have a section on offering protocol and respectful care, honorariums. We have a link here. And so we have Treaty 6 and we've added Treaty 7 and 8, including Michif Cultural Connections, a really great organization in St. Albert, Urban Aboriginal Voices Society in Red Deer, and a list of Native friendship centers across the province. Feel free to look through there and get a hold of us as well if you would like to connect with somebody in this community. And very last, we have our PD sessions. So I have here the PD sessions that we offer. And here's a little bit of feedback that teachers had that have engaged with us. I've been honored to work in partnership with Knowledge Keepers and Elders to deliver 20 full day sessions across the province. And here is a bit of a description of some of the sessions that we offer. But I encourage you to get in touch with us if you'd like to do some sessions, either with teachers or in schools with students. Please get a hold of us at info@jhcenter.org. I'd love to connect with you, and we're in the process right now of figuring out how to do some of these online, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much. I can look forward to connecting with you. Back to Megan.
Wonderful. Well, because I haven't seen any questions come up, I'm going to take us to the close. So for those who were able to join us today, we really want to thank you. We couldn't have done this work, as Chelsea had said, without the participation of all the youth, the schools who participated, the knowledge keepers and community members who contributed so much to the creation of this resource. We want to send a big thank you to Nexi Alarcon, who put together the website, and of course to our funders who have helped make this work possible. So that includes the Government of Canada, the Government of Alberta, and the Stollery Charitable Foundation. Please do reach out if you want to learn more about our programming, and we're so happy that you could join us today. Thank you so much.